electrical diagnostics is always the issue. And over here I'm only getting 100 volts, but I'm showing 235, 238 at the meter, at the pedestal. And so at a little bit less than 60 hertz, and right now the battery charger is drawing about 10 amps. It's not running at full capacity. It's throwing in 41 amps, and that's net. It's at the charger. It's putting off 58 amps. So we're losing some amperage there. I think that's just what's going into the batteries. It's always low like that, and we do have other things running, like the battery charger itself. Actually, the battery charger is running on AC power, so this is all DC. This is our house battery bank, and so it's pretty dead. I'm going to see if it'll hold a charge. I'll let it charge overnight, and yeah, I may go back out there to try to find find what's going on with the power and why we're not getting the full power at the boat. It's tough being me. Sometimes I just have, I basically had a short in one of my cords. So I've corrected that, and now we're at 220 power. Looks like 50 hertz and drawing about 5 amps. The battery charger is putting 50 amps into the batteries, and we're on bulk charge. And hopefully by tomorrow morning we'll be somewhere closer to absorption or float. We shall see. Well, we had almost a disaster in our battery bank before we've even started our battery project, and I set the charger to charge these batteries up because they were down around 15 volts. They're showing about 15 volts, and I turned the battery charger on and let it go, and as you can see here, we've got off-gassing going on here, and this battery is still showing 170 degrees. It was up above 260 degrees. It was just about on fire when I came here this morning. And so it's a truly scary situation. It's a good thing that these batteries are headed out the door, but in the meantime, I wish I fully knew what happened. I think that they were just trying to get 40 amps or 50 amps put into them, and they weren't prepared to handle it. So anyway, we're gonna work on getting this taken out.
Batteries are pretty much too hot to touch, so we're gonna disconnect them and then just let it sit for a while, probably overnight, see if they cool off. Do you want me to do it for
There it goes.
Here.
What do you see in there?
165. 165.
And here they've given us the internal resistance on these, and they're so far they're pretty consistent. 3.29. That's the actual. I'm sorry, 0.16 ohms, and then the voltage is testing out at 3.29 from the factory. We are testing each battery for its voltage. I've been trying to test for internal resistance, but for some reason my testers are not working, and maybe somebody can comment on that and tell me what the problem is. But these are pretty high-end testers. They should test for this sort of stuff relatively easily, but I'm getting a 0L code, which means it's not measurable. So but it should be able to do milliohms. Well, here they've given us bus bars. They give you 2 bus bars for 2 batteries, plus studs and nuts, which I've assembled one here because I'm going to go get a couple of longer ones, M6 bolts, in order to be able to put some of the leads on. These are great for connecting the batteries, but when you go to put the leads on, you don't want to be using the last 2 threads. Well, I got these 4 batteries down by myself, but it was a brutal piece of work, and I'm too old for this, so I've made arrangements with some of the yard guys to come help get the other 4 out. I didn't realize they were as tall as they are, or as heavy. I mean, these things weigh 60 or 70, maybe even 75 pounds, and they're not easy to get out of the boat. Luckily, all the lithium batteries, because they're cells, they're a lot lighter, and those were already on board, so we're good with that. As usual, I'm just absolutely sweating away in the Caribbean sun. It's hot here, so I wanted to show y'all what was going on here. Look at this shunt. I think it's completely fried. There was reporting that it was offline, and it's melted. It's not melted from the power coming through, it's melted from the heat of the batteries boiling next to it. And so both shunts are that way. They're in really bad shape. This one too, so I'm gonna have to order up some new shunts, I think. Luckily a shunt will continue to carry its voltage through it. It's just a measuring device, and it does it by measuring resistance at the 2 blocks on either side, so it's very sensitive to that. So here's a look at how the battery compartment looks now that it's all cleaned out. Wendy did a real nice job of cleaning this up. And what I've got going on here, I've documented all the wiring that comes in here, and we're going to clean all this up and get that fixed. It's brought up to standard, at least as best as I can. These cables are so big, and the wiring runs, you know, nowadays would be planned probably better. But here my battery charger is set to putting off what I call 3.65 over there at the charger. I think there's a little bit of resistance along the way, and I may have to bump it at the charger. I'm afraid to do so because you really can't take these batteries above 3.65. But the real thing is to get all the batteries to the same voltage and very close to their charge voltage. So I think we'll probably be okay with this, and then we would use the battery charger at 28.8 volts or whatever the recommended setting is in order to bring it up to the final full voltage. A little dark in here, unfortunately. I don't have any lights, but this is what 24 cells look like when they're all lined up. If you do this every day, you get used to all of this, and it doesn't scare the crap out of you. All right, it's time to start charging. It's showing 3.28 volts, which is basically the pack voltage. The battery charger's not on yet. The point of top balancing is that you cannot tell, based on even very, very good multimeters, you cannot tell what the state of charge is on these batteries. Normally you could equate the battery voltage with how charged the battery is, and you can't do that with LifePo or LFP batteries. It just isn't gonna. It's just not a good enough number. And so the trick is you have to bring it up to where all of the cells are at the same state of charge. And there's really only 2 places where you can be guaranteed of that, and that's at either top balancing or bottom balancing. In which case you take the batteries down again to a spot where once the curve starts to fall off, once the charging curve starts to fall off on the low end, the same thing happens. It leaves, and you would see this on a DeWalt battery, you know, on a drill or something, that you'll be using it, everything's fine, and then all of a sudden, bam, it just stops. And that's the internal BMS turning the thing off because it's reached too low of a voltage. And it just, you know, that's the nature of it. So so we've chosen to top balance these because it's easier for us. We don't have an easy way to put a draw on these things and bring them down reliably. So the tools at our disposal are really a big battery charger and a multimeter. So those are the things that we're focusing on. Something to note, and this is an important part of this whole process, is the batteries come charged to a little bit less than 3 volts. And this has to do with shipping. They're not allowed to ship the batteries when they carry a full charge. So they take it right to the exact number, maximum that they can do by law, by the shipping rules. And then, and that's not a full charge at all, obviously. And so bringing it up to the top of the charging curve is the important thing. However, it's demoralizing to watch, because over a 2 or 3 hour period, the voltages go up like 8 or 9 millivolts, something small like that, and you're looking to get 400 millivolts to go from, say, 3.3 up to 3.6. So you probably look at that 300 millivolts when it's coming in at 0.008 of a volt over a 2 or 3 hour period. You get the feeling that you're not getting anywhere. But that's not really true, because the charging curve and the discharge curves of these batteries are so flat. And when you look at the graph, and I'm going to try to see if I can throw a graph into the video, to do it right, you would have to extend the x-axis out for, like, to the other side of the room, to have it be representative of what's actually happening. It stays at a relatively flat level for forever, all the way through the middle of the charging or the discharging side of the scale. And that little bit of voltage is actually taking it closer and closer to the final ramp, where it just goes boom straight on up to 3.65 volts, which is what you're kind of shooting for. I set my charger to 3.6 volts because I've come to believe, based on what I've seen from people who really seem to know what they're doing, that last little bit of charging isn't really material, because it's you already have almost the entire full charge. At that point, what you're shooting for is a stable number, but it has to be off the flat part of the curvature, and that's what we're trying to do with top balancing, is get to a point where all of the cells are equally charged. If you notice on the internet, when people are doing a lot of these explanations, they're using a 50 or a 100 amp hour battery, and the reason why that is, it looks like the whole thing goes easily and quickly, because you have relatively minor levels of low levels of capacity in comparison to these 280 amp hour cells that we have. And while they last a long time before, there's a lot of capacity, they can go for a long time before they need to be recharged. Once they do need to be recharged, it's gonna take some time to do that too, because there's a lot of time involved with bringing a depleted 280 amp hour cell back up, although it happens a lot faster when it's in series. The amount of time it takes to recharge a battery pack when it's in series is much lower than having individual cells in parallel. If you have 24 cells that are 280 amp hours each, and you multiply 24 times 280, you'll get 6,720 amp hours. This is the additive nature of these cells. If you take 6,720 and divide by whatever charging amps you have, in our case 80 charging amps, you'll still get 84 hours it'll take to charge all 24 of these cells if they're all in parallel. And that's a long time. However, that said, there's a couple things going on. First of all, our battery charger, for some reason or the other, is only putting off 21 amps. And I have a feeling it's because the people back at Mastervolt never really envisioned that people would be charging, 3.2 volts. It's within the range of what the charger can do, but I don't think they imagined that people would be wanting to charge 80 amps at such a low voltage. I should add that the way to speed this up is to put all 8 cells in series and then hook up your BMS so that the BMS controls the whole system and makes sure that everything gets shut down if one cell gets too high. But you need the BMS. I've seen a couple of websites where guys have done it without the BMS. They've basically stuck 28 volts going into a little bit less than the 29.5 volts that that would be the maximum for the batteries, but giving it a little bit of cushion and taking it up to 28 volts. But you have to be right on top of everything. You really need to be there with a multimeter, like hour by hour, making sure that every cell is well below 3.65. You can't allow it to any one to ever go above that. And if you blink your eye or go away or whatever and leave it for a while, you could come back and find one of your cells damaged. If you have the BMS attached, you can do this no problem. You would say then, well, why don't you just set up the whole battery pack with the BMS and go ahead and start using it? And people can do that, but really what you're trying to do is you need to get the thing top balanced, and you're trying to get the majority of the charging taken care of, as quickly as possible, and then hit the last little bit in parallel. And so that's what you do. You basically get the battery pack fully charged and with the BMS controlling everything, and then the BMS normally cuts out at 28.8 volts. So you're mostly there. Then you take the pack apart, you put it into parallel, all 8 in parallel, and stick the charger on it at 3.6 or 3.65 volts, and take that last little bit. And believe me, when you get to the end of the charging curve, when you're at 3.45 or 3.5 or something like that, it's going to make that jump pretty quickly once you're there. Once you've got the middle part of that flat section of the charging curve taken care of, the last bit won't be hard. This is the last bank of 8 in this pack that's being top balanced, and I figure it'll be done. It's been running since yesterday. I figure it'll be done sometime today or tomorrow morning. I'm not in a giant rush. I've got other things I can do, and I am doing. Alright, well, I gotta say, running wiring cleanly, especially when you're using very large gauges of wire, is just a drag. And this has taken days just to get to this position now. And it's going to be hours and hours more before I can get this wrapped up. I'm working on the negative side right now. The way these shunts work is that all of your incoming negatives have to go onto the one post, and that means I'm going to need to use a bus bar because I've got just way too many to put on this shunt. This is the fried shunt. It's not going to work. I'm not even going to hook it up. I'm just going to use it as a bus bar of its own, and I have actually three more shunts ordered, because these ones melted when I overheated the batteries. Well, my negative side's going to need a lot of work to clean up, but I don't have the proper shunts right now, so I'm going to wait on that. So all of the wiring has been run through Blue Sea Systems Circuit Wizard app, which is an awesome app, a really great help when you're doing wiring. And then we're kind of on the home stretch here. I have to get these batteries up and running today. So this is the Daly BMS that we're using here. There'll be 3 of these for the 3 packs of batteries, and so 150 amps each. I probably should have gone with 200 amps, but the problem I was running into was that the bigger the amperage, the larger the unit becomes. In the fan one, it starts becoming too tall to fit in here. That I need, if it goes too much higher, I can't get any air circulation into the fan. So anyway, we're just kind of roughing it out right now to try to get an idea of how it's going to go, how the wiring runs are going to go. And they put a 6 AWG wire on this 150 amp BMS, and nowhere in Blue Sea Systems app can I get a 6 AWG wire to carry 150 amps. So I'm going to shift and move. I'm going to bolt a connection here to another set of lugs and an AWG4 wire going the rest of the way to the terminals, to the terminal block, or the fuse blocks over here, where it has to, I've got 3 150 amp fuses on there. Just to be safe, you always want to do that with lithium batteries, because the discharge rate is so great that if you let them, if there's a big enough draw, it'll blow things up. So you have to be careful about that. So that should work. If it doesn't, if it's too light a fuse, we'll have to cross that bridge when we come to it. But with 4 packs, I should be able to be getting 450 amps of power, and that will be plenty to run our 300 amp bow thruster. Actually, 2 of these packs should do it, but really just barely. I do believe or imagine that when I test this, it has to be done while the boat's in the water, because the thruster won't draw its full power if it's just running the prop with no resistance, the little propeller up in the tunnel. Well, we don't have our BMSs installed yet, but we do have 3 full power packs completely done and ready to go. So we are ready to launch. Bow thruster is functioning. I mean, this is crazy how this always works. It's the second that, you know, we're done, they're here with the travel lift. Well, Talisman's in the water. We're at anchor next to another oyster, oyster 47. And the place is still a wreck, but we're slowly moving everything back together. We've plenty put the beds back together. Still need some sheets and some other things, but otherwise good. The refrigerator's working. The batteries are installed, but the BMSs are not on yet, so can't do any charging or running the batteries materially down until I get the BMSs in, and I'm going to try to do that today and tomorrow morning. We have plenty of power on these things. We've doubled the amount of amp hours that we have, and we pretty much know how long we can run the refrigerator without running down our old batteries. I mean, I think I probably have 3 or 4 days minimum of power before it got low enough to damage the battery. So I'll hook up the first BMS hopefully later on today. And I was having trouble with my probes on the multimeter. I was having trouble reading the leads, the balance leads on that first harness. So I figured I would just wait and come back to it. We've got this first BMS on the right is functioning now. We finally got it up. It took a while, and they did not provide any instructions from Daly on this, which they claimed that they did, but nothing came with the boxes. So there was a few close calls. There's a very specific wiring diagram for this parallel port module, the small red box on the right of each of the BMSs, and if you connect the wires incorrectly in the wrong order, you can blow it up, and that's true of the main BMSs as well. You know, microvolt power usually won't damage electronics, but what will damage is high voltage, like 28 volt type stuff is what will damage it. So you have to be very, very careful about plugging in the balancing leads, which are these here. They have to be, you have to check those first with a multimeter to make sure that they that you don't have it miswired somehow. And I'm going to do that right now. Okay, so on our multimeter we've selected for DC voltage. That is the railroad tracks looking symbol instead of the squiggly sine wave. And the range, how many digits it is important. If you do microvolts, it won't show, and at 3 digits it gives me a wrong number as well. So if I go to 2 digits on the voltage, that works the best. And then I take the balancing leads like this, pin them down with the negative probe, and then one by one I'm going to check the numbers. It's going to go up by about 3.5 volts or so each time I move to the next lead. So the first lead is now at, let's see it there, 3.31, second lead at 6.63, third lead at 9.96, fourth lead at 13.28, 1660, 2657. That's wrong. Something's not right. But let's go back and find out why. And this is why we do this test. Because once you plug it in, if it's wrong, the entire BMS goes up in smoke. So let's let's take this up and check the leads again. Okay, so I flagged these already, and I can see right here that this is lead 6 on the number 8 post, because we start with the first cell, and we get the negative wire onto the first cell, and then each positive cell from there we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And so somehow I got this label upside down and I thought it looked like an 8, I guess. So it's why we label them, and it's also why we check them. And I can see number 8's right there. So these two are reversed. And so I'm going to flip those real quick and then see if our number's correct. But this is a super important piece of the testing of each of these. Okay, let's try this a second time. So first lead is 3.3 volts, second 6.64, third 9.98, fourth is 13.28, 16.60, 19.92, 23.25, 26.57. Okay, so we're good. Everything is checking out there. Do you concur, Miss Wendy?
I concur.
Excellent.
I play a very important role in this.
All right, so now the next thing to do is it has to be brought online.
Is it there?
I think so. Let's connect back up. Second one's not yet. There it goes. Okay, take this off.
Yay! That must make you feel very good.
Oh my God, does it make me feel good. 3 are in place and working, so this part of the project is complete as far as I'm concerned. Although my battery charger still isn't wanting to charge. I don't know why. It just says charger off. I'm going to continue to look into that. However, I'm getting good numbers on the phone. Basically at about 26.6 volts on this one battery bank. If I go to the second one, I've got about 26.5 volts. The parallel modules are basically going to balance these against each other at all times to keep them all at the same voltage, so that one doesn't get used all the time. Then it should draw equally as well. So when we use the bow thruster, we're not just taking all of one battery and part of another. We're going to be drawing through all 3 simultaneously, and then it protects itself by making sure that not only the cells are balanced, but that the packs the 3 packs are also balanced. So that's just how that works. Oh yeah, that definitely fried. I touched one of the negative leads to one of the bus bars and gave it a good jolt. And this is why you have fuses in line to protect the batteries. It's a 150 amp fuse to go with the 150 amp BMSs, and it did its job, which was to protect the battery bank. So we're here in Carriacou, a little bit north of Grenada, and we've been down here for almost a month and having just a great time. We had to do a big 450-mile passage down from the BVI to get here, and the batteries have been unbelievable. I mean, we did our whole 3-4 day passage, 3.5 day passage down from the BVI without charging the batteries. We never turned the engine on. We just, you know, we set a beam reach all the way here at 8 knots. It was unbelievable passage, and that's been the benefit of this battery system. It's been unbelievable. I'm at a test right now where I'm almost a week and a half in without a charge, and we still have 483 amp hours of charge left in our battery pack. We haven't even gotten to the full charge of our old battery packs, and it's just unbelievable. We're not using air conditioning, but we can use air conditioning. We can get 3 to 4 days, 5 days even, using our air conditioning judiciously, like at night. But still, just such a great upgrade to the boat, and everything's been wonderful. So we're pretty happy with the install.